What's the most important resource in the entire universe?
Water, maybe?
Is it?
It's a great dumb question. I'll say that.
Okay, wait, there can't...
I don't know. I would say water. Yeah, because water is the universal solvent, and water enables our biological life to happen. You don't have water, you're done. You also need oxygen, but oxygen's kind of in water. So if you, like in a pinch, you could figure out how to get oxygen out of water.
It's right in there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But how would you get the oxygen out of the water?
Electrolysis is one way I would do it. Yeah, that's probably how I would do it.
See, and that's why I'd go energy. I would just say energy is the thing. Harnessable, usable energy.
Okay.
Right? Because food is energy. Heat is energy. I mean, it seems like if there were ever going to be a situation where some evil tycoon takes over everything.
With a monocle.
With a monocle, obviously.
He's got a vest.
And a dirigible that has auto guns on all the sides of it.
That would be awesome. That'd be so awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Does he have facial hair?
No.
None?
No, he's just really fat. He's got like a big chin that goes like a...
You don't think that mustache curls at the tips?
The mustache does. Okay, yeah. Yeah, okay, he's got a mustache.
I think so.
You're right. Go ahead.
Yeah, it almost holds up the monocle.
Yeah, what's this guy doing?
Well, he's harnessing all the energy. This guy, he figured out how to make the energy happen in such a way that he just owns all the energy. He discovered a thing that renders obsolete and so inefficient all other forms of gathering and harnessing energy that now all of the energy business runs through him, which effectively brings all governments to their knees. And now energy guy, he's the king of everything, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous and steampunky, but also if you owned all energy and nobody else, no other technology could touch your ability to access it, you're king of everything.
You are, yeah. You're in control of everything. I was thinking about that today in the shower. I was thinking about Putin. I'll say it. I was thinking about Putin, and I was thinking about the meetings he has, and he walks out of the doors into the big fancy room, and everything looks fancy. And I was thinking, you've got everything, like everything you need for your body to work. You have every physical thing you would ever need, but that's not enough for you. What's that in the brain? What is that? Like an all-powerful being. It's not so much about me having what I need for myself. It's that I need to deprive other people of the things they want. Therefore, they have to go through me.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that and thinking about how what that does to a human soul.
So really, Putin, who I think you shouldn't feel weird about that. I think most dudes at some point in their life just go stand in a shower and think about Putin. But Putin, what he's really trying to do here, straight face.
Well done.
Brave face.
Well done. Yeah.
He's trying to harness the most energy and weaponize it for his purposes. What is the energy? It's the energy of an economy, of the state, of political pressure, of weapons, of humans who do the things he says to do. But really, every dictator, every power-hungry person is trying to harness and weaponize more energy than other people can, because that's what gets you the dirigible with autoguns on it. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Basically, you want to control other people's access to the things they need.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, say, fuel to heat your homes.
Food.
Yeah, another great example.
Yeah.
Not hypotheticals in this case.
Yeah.
At all.
Interesting.
And so, throughout history, both in fiction and in reality, people pick a target when they want power, and they try to harness that energy from that sector or a collection of sectors. One of the archetypes that we see, not so much in history, but in fiction, is this evil, mad, genius scientist who tries to figure out how to do energy better than everybody else. And if he can just figure out cold fusion or
perpetual motion,
for example, then all of a sudden, he just catapults to king of everything.
I just went out to Idaho.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Idaho National Labs, and I filmed several videos about nuclear energy. I'm a big nuclear energy fanboy.
Likewise.
I think it's really, really cool. I think nuclear energy gets a bad rap, but I got to see a test reactor. And this is a place where they're testing new fuels and new ways to control nuclear fuels so that hopefully one day in the future we can make reactors that just can't melt down, for example.
Fuels meaning elements with names that are hard to pronounce with really high atomic numbers?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But,
Okay.
but there's different types of fuels, I learned. There's uranium type fuels. You can have metal fuels. You can have ceramic fuels.
Huh?
Yeah, you can have ceramic nuclear fuel. Didn't know that. A lot of what's going on is figuring out how to control the heat, because ultimately a nuclear plant makes steam is ultimately what's happening. You don't make electricity, you make steam, and then the steam makes the electricity. Yeah. Super cool. So anyway, I've been thinking a lot about that recently is my point. How to make usable electricity, how to make all these types of things. Where are we going with this?
So in that situation, if a given country just built an incredibly stable, safe, sustainable nuclear grid with far more capacity even than is needed, and the people owned it, then they would all be king.
Huh.
It would have a democratizing effect.
It's interesting that you say this. I spoke to a gentleman who was there at the lab, and he grew up in the American West, where you are.
I like it there.
Yeah, he grew up in Utah. And he said when he was a boy, people had local energy production capabilities. So people would have a generator in town, like a town named, let's name this Freedomville. So Freedomville would have a generator that everybody locally would own and operate. And then when they needed the lights to come on, they would go turn it on as a collective locally. They weren't integrated into the grid, so to speak. I got thinking about this because the moment you connect Freedomville to, I don't know, what's the next town over?
Is it a good town or a bad town?
It's a good town.
Libertyton.
Freedomville and Libertyton. I don't know. Good town was pretty good.
Good town. Okay, let's go with that.
Goodton.
Okay, Goodton.
Goodton. So if you got Freedomville and Goodton, and they're right next to each other, and they each have generators, and those generators are producing 120 volts, 60 hertz AC. We're gonna be in America. If we were in Europe or if we were in England, we would have 50 hertz. But here in Freedomville, we have 60 hertz. The moment you touch the grid in Freedomville to the grid in Goodton, you have to synchronize the electricity.
That makes sense to me. Okay.
Yeah, because you've got the sine wave going up and down. If you have them out of phase, you basically cancel the power out. It gets really weird.
Like when you screw things up with your audio recording.
Yeah.
There's certain ways to make it so that you clearly just recorded audio, but you make an error in the recording in a stereo channel, and you actually go and listen to it, and there's nothing. But then you go and listen to that on a device that can only provide a mono rendering, and you're like, no, it's there. What the heck is going on? Yeah, I can understand the principle from sound, even though I can't visualize it.
Yeah,
electrically, I think. I get it.
Additive and subtractive interference. One of the things that's interesting, an aside here, on YouTube, they have these things when you upload a video, and they will analyze the audio track, and they'll pull out the words, and then be like, oh, they're talking about this. You know, they can analyze things and compare it to other things. There was one scammer or whatever you want to call these people that do things. As a countermeasure to YouTube, they put a left track and a right track because they figured out somehow that YouTube was analyzing everything in mono. They did this destructive interference technique, and so they made the left track and the right track subtract each other so that when it went into the sniffer algorithm at YouTube, it was just a flat line audio signal. I thought that was genius.
But actual human ears listening on a mono device could hear it?
Listening on a stereo device could
How
hear
did they keep that from phase canceling to the human ear?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It was left and right ear, so I have no idea.
Huh.
I'm realizing there's more to the story I don't understand at this point, but it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, in
technique.
principle, I like it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so I'm going to connect Freedomville to Goodton, and we have to get our synchronization right. I just think that's interesting. He said when he was younger, they had these generators. Then when they started connecting to the grid, they started having to worry about all this stuff. And then eventually a larger entity at a regional level had to take over the management of the power because all these things had to be taken into account.
From the big town.
Correct.
Septopolis. What a dump.
But what he did say is, in the future, this gentleman feels that we're going back to that. Because as people are able to generate power locally, whether it be solar, whether it be small scale, interesting things.
Sure. Orphans on treadmills.
Yeah, that sort of thing. No. No.
Thanks for clarifying that you're against that.
Yeah, I'm against that.
I don't think anybody was clear on that.
His point was, as people start to generate power locally, whether it be a wind turbine or whether it be any of these things, and you plug them back into the grid, people are going to have to start managing things locally again. The holy grail, or the thing that people really want right now, is small-scale nuclear. And so the idea is, hey, what if every little town had a small containerized nuclear reactor?
What does containerized mean?
Logistically, a pallet is a unit that you can move around, and all the infrastructure is built around moving pallets. Forklifts, you know what a pallet looks like. You got two holes in the bottom, you just go pick something up.
Yep.
And you load these pallets onto containers. Containers are the big metal boxes, and on the corners of the containers, they have these really interesting cam lock lugs. Cam lock. I don't know why I said like.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah, cam lock lugs. And so if you ever look at one of these trucks that have a container on the back and you look at the corners, you can see that there's these little, I don't know how to describe the shape. It looks like an arrowhead that goes into the corners, and then there's a little lever, and you throw the lever and it locks the container onto the truck.
Yeah.
All these distances are standardized, and so you can have a 40-foot container, a 20-foot container. You can order parts from Hungary, and they'll put it on a train, and then they'll ship it with the train to the ship, and then they'll put it on the ship with a crane, and then they'll put it, they'll send it across the ocean, and then in Mobile, Alabama, they have another crane with the same lugs, and they can take it off and send it all the way to your house if you want. I don't know who created that. It's genius, whoever did. That'd be a great deep dive to understand that.
Yeah.
So whoever came up with a container changed the world, because everybody standardized their infrastructure to be able to do that. So the idea is, if we have a container that is a nuclear reactor that could generate power, that'd be amazing. I know the military is looking at that. They would love a way, when I have a FOB, a forward operating base, it'd be amazing to be able to use the backbone of the military infrastructure to be able to just like, we're going to forklift a nuclear energy device out there, and this is a safe nuclear energy device that we're not going to melt down or anything like that. Our fuels are designed in such a way that they're safe, they're low level, and they give us just enough heat to do what we got to do and make electricity, but there's no huge environmental impact if, let's say, a bomb gets dropped on it because it's war.
Well, what would happen if a bomb got dropped on it because it's war?
I have no idea.
Well, I would want somebody to know that.
Yeah, they'd probably figure that out.
I want them to test it or something.
Yeah. But I think
it turns out it's super bad.
It turns out.
Dang.
Yeah, that stinks. But I think it's interesting because moving forward, I can imagine Freedomville having a small nuclear reactor, tiny, that does what it needs to do. Maybe it's hooked up to some kind of, I don't know, Stirling engine, or maybe it's a turbine, or something that's simple to operate. And so they're talking about making these small-scale nuclear plants in factories. That would be amazing.
Small-scale plant inside of a factory that fabricates something having nothing to do with energy.
Well, I mean, just think about it. So imagine a car factory.
I'm imagining it.
Okay. Now, instead of a car being rolled along the line, you have a little metal pressure vessel looking thing.
Okay.
And that is the nuclear reactor. And that nuclear reactor has the ability to, you have all the gazintas and the gazaltas, all the things that go into it and go out of it. And they hook them all up, and then they move that forward. And then that gets put into, and then at the end, you're sliding that into a container. Like you're shoving a whole stack of Pringles into a Pringles can,
Okay.
And
you
so,
just combined the words shoving and sliding in your previous iteration. Sliding, and I loved it, and I'm going to incorporate that into my life.
Did I say sliding?
I think you said sliding.
Okay.
If you didn't, I'm doing it the same way my daughter.
Well, you saw me check my text message that rattled off in my pocket there. So we slipped down into 75% brain for a second.
My kids combined pointy and pokey to create poinky.
Oh yeah.
I'm never giving that up either. No, you just grab those things when they come. All right. So the idea would be then, instead of drawing power for fabrication, some sort of fabrication plant from the same grid that is powering a community, that power would be isolated in some sort of little tiny nuclear reactor dedicated to that factory, that plant. Is that what you're saying?
I can imagine a future where a town has the ability to hook into the grid, and the grid is smart, and the grid can make decisions at the nodes. Right now, there are little switches on power poles, and a lineman or a line woman or whatever we're saying these days will go out and we'll just flip that switch.
Okay.
And like break off a whole section of the power grid in the area.
Okay.
So decisions are being made at the extremities of the power grid. But there are also these intertwined things that have to be balanced in the power grid. The difficult thing about electricity is that it's a now kind of thing.
It's expensive to bank it.
Oh, it's super expensive to bank it, but when you produce it, it has to go somewhere. So if a nuclear power plant is running at full capacity, which is what you want nukes to do, you just want to ramp them up and just steady state. I'm going to run this at 100% power, and I'm making 2 megawatts or 2 gigawatts or whatever right now. And I'm just going to hum along like that. Well, you got to send that power somewhere.
What if you don't?
You dump it to some type of load, some type of resistive load.
Okay.
And
that's different than a sink, because a sink is dealing with heat energy. Here it would just be just a resistor, a chunk of rubber or something like that.
It's
right? Just ground it out.
It's interesting you bring that up, because in Finland, they have this place where they have a furnace and they heat a whole town. They have pipes under the town, and they'll just heat the whole town. So like I'm assuming you're buying heat in your house, and kind of like a radiator kind of thing. And so when they produce extra heat, they send that heat into the ground and like heat up the rock, is my understanding. I could be wrong about this.
And then that gradually makes it so that there's passive heat
you can
underneath the town as well.
When you need heat later, you can just go get the heat from the ground because you put it in the ground.
So they're creating an artificial geothermal environment.
A thermal flywheel, yeah. Pretty neat, huh?
Okay. What is a flywheel?
A flywheel is a way of storing energy.
Okay.
So let's say we have a motor, and we have the ability to produce electricity somehow, and we can turn that electrical potential into kinetic energy. And we're going to do that by rotating a large, heavy object. And that heavy object, once we get it going, we are storing our energy in the form of kinetic energy, because this flywheel has rotational inertia and probably has been designed so that it has more rotational inertia, so there's more mass out on the edges. We get that thing spinning really, really fast, and then let's say we don't have electricity anymore. Well, then we can start running our motor that was powering it. We can just flip the electrical contacts on it, and we can use that motor now as a generator.
Okay.
And that same motor that spun it up, we can now just change the circuit, and now it is going to pull that energy back out of that flywheel. So as we put a resistive load across the contacts on the motor voltage will now, we'll now be able to use it.
So a flywheel holds that energy for later access. A sink is used for byproduct energy that you don't need to redirect anywhere. It just needs to go somewhere.
I'm not familiar with the term sink in that way, but I see what you're saying. It makes sense. Yeah.
But there is a difference, right? If there are going to be opportunities where you can hold energy for later use, because a flywheel isn't a battery.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a battery is chemical. You're talking about something.
It's a form of battery. I mean, I don't know how you want to define battery. So an electrochemical battery, like a voltaic pile back in the day, like one of the first batteries that was ever invented, there's a jar, and you've got a stack of dissimilar metals, and you've got some type of fluid in there, and then some type of dielectric type substance, I don't know. And then you're able to get an electrical potential out of two different contacts there. One of my favorite ways to store energy that I've ever seen is super simple. It's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's called Raccoon Mountain.
I thought you were going to say abdominal fat.
Fat is good, though.
I mean, it's an option.
Yeah.
Raccoon Mountain?
Yeah.
I don't know this.
So they have a power plant. They have a bunch of power plants all up and down the Tennessee Valley. It's part of the Tennessee Valley Authority. There's a lot of hydroelectric dams. There's several nuclear plants that operate. There's a lot of stuff. I mean, we're very blessed in this area to have many different ways to produce power, and a lot of them are clean. And so that's really cool. But one of the things they do at Raccoon Mountain is they have all these ways to produce electricity, but sometimes they're like, oh, we're making electricity and it's no longer peak time. So when do you think the most power demandive, is that a word? Demandive? What, how do you say what the sentence I'm trying to say?
When power would be the most in demand?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
When do you think that would be the case? What times of year, what times of day?
I would say pre-electric vehicle revolution, it would be midday through the afternoon and the hottest part of the day when you have to use climate control and people are at work. Post EV revolution, I would say we are either there already or we are trending in this direction, that it's going to be late afternoon into the evening where you're still doing climate control. People are still on devices, but the vehicle's already in the garage and plugged in.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I would think dead of winter, cold time of day, if you have electric heat and stuff.
Electric heat's pretty unusual in the West, so my mind didn't go there.
Yeah.
If you've got a house that you're trying to heat with electric heat,
you've done it wrong?
Yeah, respectfully, kind of. Yeah, and that happens when you're way out in the sticks, a house that was built 20, 30 years ago before there was development in the mountains or whatever. I mean, you can get electrical out there, but then you're paying unbelievable money to heat that house with electric. So the little place that we had in the woods.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
You'll notice that we had baseboard heat throughout that entire rickety old cabin that we were trying to fix up. And you'll also notice that it was never on. Do you remember how we heated that house?
You had a pellet stove, right?
Yeah.
And you had to put these pellets, it looked like little rabbit turds, and you would put them in this little burner and it would feed them in, right?
Yeah. There's an auger that went from the reservoir and it would spin them down at a certain pace.
Were they wood?
Yeah. They're sawdust pellets, basically. This is what happens to your sawdust. It gets repurposed for heating. There's some sort of process by which they get, packed together and covered in a little organic seal that holds that packed sawdust in a tiny little, you described it well, like a rabbit turd pellet. And then you get them in bags. They're 45-pound bags, same weight as a plate for your bench press. And you dump them into a reservoir and you set your temperature. And the way that thermostat works is that the auger just runs harder when you have it set at a higher temperature. The auger runs lighter when you have it set at a lower temperature. And so you turn it on, there's an ignition pot down in the middle of this, whatever, cast iron, cast metal stove, and you'll just hear the clinks all day. Clink, 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 clink. And it's burning at any given time. We have 15 or 20 of those little rabbit pellets.
Is there a flame or is it a smolder?
It's a flame. If it's smoldering, your house is smoky and it smells bad and it's not efficient. But it's a finely tuned ratio where the mixture of oxygen and fuel and circulation throughout that device is really well balanced for a hyper efficient burn. And you can tell if you've got a good stove and if you're burning properly because you go outside and what do you see coming out of the chimney?
No smoke.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing. If you get a bunch of black smoke coming out of the chimney, I mean, it just means that you're a total mess and you need to go clean out the pot. What does it mean if there's white smoke coming out of the chimney?
There's wet pellets?
New Pope. So I thought that was fun.
The new Pope.
Hey, Matt, my audio is kind of messed up. Can we just record this and then you edit it on your side with my Bluetooth? Is that cool?
Oh yeah, just phone call. Or you sound great to me. Let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this episode of No Dumb Questions is sponsored by HelloFresh. And Matt, what's the deal with HelloFresh?
HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service that takes food geniuses and it puts them in a room and it makes them figure out what would be a good thing to eat and all the components you'd need and how to get the good components and how to design a recipe. They do all of that, the food geniuses. Then you just sign up for the service and they just send it to you. And then all you got to do is follow the instructions and cook it and it tastes good and it makes your family love each other more. Did that square with your experience?
Yeah, it's the family love each other more part that you don't expect, but it does actually happen. The food geniuses part, if you were to create a food genius, you were to cultivate them for some big, futuristic food genius competition, how would you do that?
Yeah, well, when I was in 6th grade, there was a 5-week special all one series episode of G.I. Joe where Cobra tried to make the perfect evil dictator. And so what they did is they went and raided the tombs of the greatest evil geniuses of all time. They stole their DNA and they put it all in the same bucket. Yeah, absolutely. This is how they created Serpentor. They took all the evil geniuses and they dumped all of the DNA in a bucket and they spun the bucket real hard, and then a science lady moved some levers and knobs and then hit it with a bolt of electricity. And what came out of that goop? A guy wearing a snake costume riding a floating snake chariot, and he was as evil as you would expect. So, based on what I learned about the world,
in the 80s.
Oh, they clearly did. It worked on the first try. Did you? You haven't seen it. So I would go and get all of the food geniuses. I'd harvest their DNA by raiding their tombs.
Who would we get?
Well,
Matt, you're not listening to my question.
Okay, the Earl of Sandwich. You got to get the guy who invented the sandwich. Yeah. Okay, Julius Caesar, who invented Little Caesar's Pizza and the Caesar salad. You got to get Paul Newman. He made that dressing everybody likes. Dick and Catherine Worcestershire. So you got to get them. I'm pretty sure those are the inventors of that. I'm doing all the heavy lifting here. What are you? Why are you even here?
I'm stupefied. You just did all that from nothing. We just turned these microphones on. It's like, hey, it's time to record the HelloFresh ad, and you just pulled all of that. Your brain is so fascinating, dude. Right. It's incredible.
And then you put it all. You put their DNA in a bucket. You swirl it up, and you get the guy who makes the HelloFresh recipes.
Yeah, I think Emeril Lagasse, the guy the Italian chef guy, and I think I would get
better.
Justin Wilson, the guy that guarantee that guy. I think he should be in there.
Oh, excellent.
And so and what's the lady? She had a show. She was
Meryl Streep.
No, Julia Child. No,
oh yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, the point is HelloFresh.
Yes,
so
it is.
If you want meals that are prepared by, I don't know if we told you this, but Matt and I went and got all the DNA from all these chefs, and we put it in a bucket, and we spun it up real hard.
Then we
hit it with a bolt of lightning.
Bolt of lightning. That's right.
And then out popped the HelloFresh chef, and they decided they were going to give you this following offer. Mm-hmm. If you want to go to hellofresh.com/NDQ free, that's like no dumb questions, NDQ free, and use code NDQ free for breakfast for life. Now, Matt, we have to explain breakfast for life. That's a big,
it's a big deal. So here's what I've done to learn more about that. I went to hellofresh.com/NDQ free on my smart device. It's an exclusive offer for podcast listeners, for the NDQ audience here. You get the free breakfast for life. And so then what I see right under the free breakfast for life are 4 circular waffles that all look delicious. I'm scrolling here. You pick your preferences. So I went through that. I said I like the protein. I said, what are you trying to accomplish here with your HelloFreshing? And I said, I want healthy food that I can make quickly by myself. And so then it put that in its HelloFresh computer, hit it with a bolt of lightning, pulled a lever, a bunch of smoke comes out, and then they figure out what meals would fit that profile for me, and they send me awesome things, which it looks like is going to be a lot of meat and veggies, is what it's telling me.
Yeah.
Given the input that I gave it. What did you say?
But let me explain the free breakfast for life thing. If you go ahead and go to NDQ, basically hellofresh.com/NDQ free, use the code NDQ free. They give you 1 breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. So I think this is a program where if you sign up now, you get that breakfast item in every box as long as you keep that subscription active. That's awesome.
That's a good idea.
That's like, have you heard about that guy that bought, I forget his name, but it was some airline where he bought a ticket for $25,000 for like airline tickets for life.
Yes.
It's kind of like that, only you get a breakfast item in every box of HelloFresh as long as you keep your subscription app active. That's how it works.
Yeah, and they finally gave up trying to run that guy off. And finally, they just embraced it. And we're like, all right, Mr. Fly 5 flights every single day because you're allowed to. You got us. Let's make it a thing. I think you want to be that person with HelloFresh breakfast.
Yeah, like you and your cell phone plan. I know about that.
Oh.
Yeah, so go to hellofresh.com/NDQ free. Use the code NDQ free for free breakfast for life. one breakfast item per box while subscription is active. We'd be grateful.
Yep. Again, that's HelloFresh.com/NDQ free and use the code NDQ free for free breakfast for life. The boxes are going to show up on time. Stuff's going to be fresh. There's going to be a recipe card in there that's going to be easy to use, that you're going to want to save. If you haven't tried out HelloFresh, you're going to love it. If you have tried it out, it's time to get back on that because the HelloFresh is doing free breakfast for life and it's delicious.
Thank you very much for supporting the sponsor that supports Matt and I's goofy little podcast that we hope you enjoy.
It's a really impressive device, and we had 2 of them there in that house. And so what we'd have to do is take the truck down into town, and you buy a whole bunch of bags, or maybe you have them deliver a pallet, and then your heating routine for your house is you sling up a bag, you bring it in. I had a way that I cut it. I was like, I'm like an assassin. I had this really cool cut that I would do on the bag. It made me feel rad. And then you dump it into the reservoir.
You basically perform seppuku on the bag.
Exactly.
Or harikari.
I don't know what the word is, but I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
It sounded Far Eastern. So yeah, that. and then, so part of my nightly duties, you have those as the husband and man of the house. You lock certain things, you check certain things, you arm certain things, whatever. Part of my nightly duties was got to put that fresh bag of pellets in the stove so everybody's warm all through the night. It's just a very different routine to heat your place. So why would I go through all of that effort and energy on that cabin way out in the woods, far from most of the infrastructure in the grid, to heat my house when I could just use electricity? Well, cost. I could heat that whole poorly insulated home out in the woods with pellets for a reasonable amount, but electricity was 4 or 5, 6 times the cost. It's just insane. But you got to have that because if you travel, even if you're gone for, a whole long day, you can't keep the pellets full. And so you set it to 48 degrees and your pipes don't freeze.
There's also a new grill design. It's by a company called Traeger.
Okay.
And it heats the grill with these little pellets. They're smaller pellets. Like they're closer to rat turds than rabbit turds. Mm-hmm. But it'll also auger in, and it has a burner, a little element right there. It's pretty cool. That's neat.
Yeah.
Does it have a smell to it? Like, can you buy potpourri smelling?
Well, yeah. Okay. So these kind of stoves, some of them have a hot area on top. Many do not.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that have a hot area above the burner, you can get a real heavy cast iron pot that has the spring to dissipate heat for the grip. You can picture it.
Yep.
And you can set that on there, and there is entirely natural potpourri that you can throw in there with water. It humidifies the space, and you get that potpourri smell.
Yeah, the wood burning stove in here has a flat grid on top, and I remember the power went out one time. We were heating the house with it, and we cooked pancakes on it.
Oh, really?
It was really cool. Yeah.
I always threatened to do it, and we never did it. What I got is I had the little pot that I would use on my wood burning fireplace and on my pellet stove. So we had 2 pellet stoves in that cabin and a wood burner in our previous place in Wyoming. But eventually, my fan started to break down and make noise. The fireplace unit on all of these, it has a fan, or else the heat just sits there. It doesn't do you any good.
Yeah.
And it was expensive. I just didn't have the money to do the repair. It was a very expensive fix to make that fan work. So I ordered in parts. I replaced everything I could. But when we ran it, it would work, but it was super loud. There's just nothing I could do without replacing the whole unit. So what do? You can't watch TV. You can't talk. Maybe every now and then to really warm up the house fast, you run it, but everybody's super excited to turn it off. Well, then I went and visited a buddy, an old mountain man of the woods in Du Bois, and he had these simple machines that were entirely made of metal, and they sat on top of the fireplace.
I've seen these. They're like a Stirling. Basically, it takes the temperature differential and it operates a fan.
Yes.
No external source other than the temperature differential.
Yes.
That's amazing.
It was the coolest thing ever. And so I just bought a few of those. You set them up there and you just watch your fireplace heat up, and that little fan blade is just sitting there. It looks like almost like a windmill tower, like a miniature matte black windmill tower. But there's sort of this heat distribution set of prongs up at the top, like blades. Heat blades up at the top.
Like a heat sink on a processor in your computer.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
The heat would move up that, and you would just see the silver blades of the fan start to twitch. The heat demons are back. Look out, kids. And then pretty soon, and the thing would just kick heat across the whole room.
Was it fast?
Yeah, it moved hard. I mean, you could put your finger in there and it wouldn't gas you, but it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
Either. I mean,
it was enough to move air.
Yeah, and 2 or 3 of them, it would really cover the room pretty well. It wasn't instant heat distribution like the loud fan that I repaired, half repaired, but it would move. And I always thought that was the coolest thing because I'm not doing anything. I'm just using this passive energy to make it do something active that I want it to do. Kind of neat.
That's cool because the energy was going to go in the room anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
So what it is an even localer energy management strategy. Now, I'm sure there are people listening to our conversation that is cringing at the idea of burning biomass because, it's easy to get that mixture wrong and have that burn ugly. But also, I think a lot of the assumptions people have about the polluting qualities of burning biomass are a little bit antiquated because I tell you what, the pellet stove that was in that place that we bought was on its last leg. It was super old. It was not tuned. And it was not efficient. You could see it in the box, the way it burned. You could see it coming out the chimney, that it wasn't burning efficiently. You could feel it in the unevenness and unmanageability of the heat in the living space. And you could see how inefficient it was and how much it cost just in pellets, how often I had to put more in. Eventually, it just broke. It quit running well enough to justify it. And maybe the biggest expense that I put into trying to fix up that house is I went and bought a super efficient new pellet stove. And that thing was incredible. It occurs to me real quick, I misspoke. We had a wood burner on one side of the house and we had a pellet burner on the other in this place.
Mm-hmm.
I said 2 pellet burners.
Yeah.
So at any rate, this new pellet stove, it was incredible. Just immediately, our costs went in half in terms of how much we were burning. So right there, I can tell you that this old stove that wasn't tunable was consuming double the resources for less of the heat than the new stuff. So just anecdotally, I sure get the impression that we have made big strides in terms of efficiency, tuning and being more efficient with biomass consumption. But does that square with what you've seen and what you've heard, or am I just making stuff up from my own experience?
I've never had a pellet heater or anything like that, but I definitely think we're getting more efficient. In engineering, I took a thermodynamics and the heat transfer course, and it's a thing that all mechanical engineers do, and we all just let's just kind of grit our teeth and get through these classes.
Okay.
But eventually you appreciate it because it teaches you to think about the world in terms of thermodynamic laws. And so there's this thing that you always calculate, which is eta. Looks like the capital letter, the Greek letter.
Oh, the Greek letter eta, not ADA.
ETA.
Eta. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
Eta.
I don't know, eta. Yeah, we said it was fine.
Yeah, it looks like a capital cursive N.
Mm-hmm.
And you learn to always calculate eta, which is the efficiency of the system. And, of course, the goal is a 1.0 efficiency. Will never happen.
Wait, what does 1.0 efficiency mean? Repeatable, perpetual motion?
Well, basically, the amount of power that you put in is the power you get out. So that's 1.0.
So that's not perpetual motion. That is
maybe it is. Yeah, you're having to put energy into the system.
Sure.
And
okay.
So to get something out, but you're always going to get out less energy than you put in. Always. That's just thermodynamics. And so,
right. But the balance between the two, obviously, it doesn't go away. It's lost. It's distributed in some other way that isn't efficient or useful.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Friction, heat. Like you're losing loss in heat, maybe even the material itself. Maybe you're converting it to strain energy. There's really weird ways that you can lose sound. Like you're making sound and that sound vibrates the air molecules and that takes power to do that.
Is sound heat?
Oh gosh. Sound is a lot of things.
Okay.
Yeah, sound is complicated. And a pressure wave through air is super, super complicated. I took a couple of classes on that kind of stuff, or that it was in my classes, and you start hearing words like, oh, the adiabatic compression or whatever, and then you're just, my eyes just kind of glaze over.
I know compression.
Adiabatic.
That one I didn't have. No.
Yeah, it's a Yeah. You start talking about entropy and enthalpy and, isentropic, adiabatic. You start using these words, and then every engineer that I know, they hear those words and they're like, okay, yep, I know those words. And in a pinch, I could go grab that book over there.
Yeah, there you go.
And I could get you back to it. But
we got words like that too.
Like pumps and all this kind of stuff, you'll look at the enthalpy charts and you'll figure out like, well, if I'm getting this energy out of the system, putting this energy in, it's a complicated thing. And as you compress and, you compress fluids, and as you convert water to steam, you can get the fact of the phase changeover between water to steam. That alone is incredible, because ideally you would have water at 211 Fahrenheit, and then you have to put just a little bit of energy into it. Bam, you blow it into steam. Once you cross that phase change and you get the expansion, you can do incredible things with steam. And then at nuclear plants, you can do superheated steam. So what they'll do is they'll have water under incredible pressure, and it'll be past the boiling point at atmospheric pressures, but then they expand it, and not only does it just flash to steam immediately, but because it's superheated steam, it just does crazy stuff that I don't understand. And I'm not an expert in that area, but it's incredible what these engineers are doing these days. This episode of No Dumb Questions is sponsored by Morrison Nordman Wealth Management. That is new. Haven't said that on the podcast before. That's interesting, right? The reason it is sponsored by Morrison Nordman is we put a call out. We said, hey, we would love to open it up to anybody that listens to the podcast that's interested in sponsoring, because we want to talk about people that like the podcast. The company is made by two people, Matthew Nordman, Scott Morrison, and they do wealth management. And I already had somebody that I was working with to do financial management and stuff like that. Matt, you actually called and did the 15-minute getting to know you call, right?
Yeah, I did the 15-minute get to know you call, and then I did another one after that. And look, the company has wealth management in the name, and I don't really think of wealth as something that I have, but we do save every month. We do have a little retirement plan thing that we do. I mean, we're trying to do smart things with whatever extra we have, like theoretically everybody's doing, every family is doing. But dude, I have no plan. I don't know what to do. I don't know how this works. I'm busy doing things. And so the 15-minute get to know you call was great, because they told us a little bit about what they do and took some of the edge off in terms of the question of like, do I even qualify? Am I wasting your time here? Because I don't have what I would consider to be wealth. They took the edge off of that, explained what they do, and then just asked a bunch of questions about who we are and what we're into and what we're going for with life and things like that. And that was really it there. Now you know who we are. Now we know who you are. If you want to keep talking, we can look at your stuff and give you some opinions on that. And I guess that was the second step in the whole process.
And I jumped on that first call, not the one that you did, but the one before. We were like, hey, what do you do? Why do you want to sponsor No Dumb Questions? And I remember talking about like the whole process and like, hey, is this actually worth it to you? Like, would sponsoring No Dumb Questions be beneficial to you guys? And the answer was yes, because I would call it a virtual office. So if you're looking to talk to somebody that manages finances, they can help you. If you're at the stage where you don't really know how to get everything in order, but you know it needs to happen, it would be worth time to call these folks. And so the thing I thought was interesting is I was just very honest. I said, hey, would it benefit you to run an ad on No Dumb Questions? And one of the reasons why I was cool with it is Matthew said, yes, if we did this and I was able to get a client that worked out well and it was mutually beneficial, then it would have been worth it to sponsor No Dumb Questions. And that's when I started feeling good about it. And so then you took the ball and did the due diligence from our side to figure out, hey, is this something we actually want to put in front of the listeners in No Dumb Questions? So thank you for doing that. And then what did you find overall?
On the personal side, for me, it was an unsticking process. Maybe there are people in the third chair who feel this, like you're going through this part of life, whatever you're in, and there are things you know you should be thinking about and organizing and getting in order, and you imagine everybody else has a plan and has all of this stuff in order. Like everybody's got a team with all the people that do taxes or estate planning, wills, whatever, any of that stuff. But you're like, but I don't have that. I don't have a clear plan on that. I was feeling that and also feeling kind of stuck and overwhelmed. Matt just did a great job of breaking it down into manageable parts that I could understand, really offering effectively what was a second opinion on how I have things set up right now. It was so helpful, not just from a you plan some boring detail stuff perspective, but it was helpful because we got right past the things that I thought would be really boring and into here's what that looks like life-wise. Here's how that unsticks you in your decision making and moves things forward. And I found it to be a very empowering conversation, I guess. I didn't expect it to have any kind of counseling cred, but it was super useful for Camilla and I for getting unstuck and feeling like we have the beginnings of some kind of plan in this aspect of our lives now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Like retirement is scary. Like that's a scary thing. And so if you don't have a plan for retirement, they do this thing. I'm reading this right from the website. They do this thing called Income Conductor, where basically they look at where you're at and they set up milestones. And then they can break it down into like short-term goals, mid-term goals, long-term goals, and what kind of return you hope to get based on what your investments look like. That's what they do. They wanted to support No Dumb Questions by getting us basically to let you know that they exist. What do you do, Matt? How do you sign up for the call? How do you do that?
Yeah, you can call or you can go to the website, which is Morrison Nordman. Nordman has 2 N's at the end, nordman.com, morrisonnordman.com. You can sign up for one of the 15-minute get-to-know you meetings, which can then roll over into a longer discovery meeting. You used the language earlier that I heard Matt use a lot when we were talking, the idea of a virtual family office that collaborates with all of the existing team that you have or that we have in place. Those conversations provide a second opinion on how you have things set up and what you're doing. Also, in kind of a weird way, it's sort of a fear of missing out insurance. That if you never talk to anybody else, you're like, I don't really know why this is what we do. We talked to one lady one time at a thing and she said, do this. And we just signed up and now we've been doing that for 15 years. I really came away feeling like, okay, somebody else has put eyes on this and they did so efficiently and empathetically. That was really helpful. And I think the other thing that they could be really useful for would be somebody who's really seen a lot of growth in their family or what they're doing in terms of their income or where they're at in life. And maybe they've kind of outgrown the team that they have worked with and they want to start the process of building a new team or adding new elements to their team for all of this aspect of life. Seems like they're really good at seeing the big picture of that as well.
Yeah, the impression I got from Matt from the call I was on with him is he's looking to build relationships with people. In order to do that 15-minute call, they're going to make sure that your values are aligned and your goals are aligned, or at least he wants to understand your goals, and then he's going to use that information to help you align with what you're trying to do. Like he's going to try to set up a plan for you. My understanding is the 15-minute consultation basically is just hey, let's chat. Let's see if it's a good fit. And if it's a good fit, great. And anybody can do that. And you just go to their website, morrisonnordman.com, 2 N's on Nordman. If you scroll down, there's a little sign up for the 15-minute call thing. Once you do that, it's like a calendar. You just pick a calendar. I just did it right now. There's a thing that says schedule a discovery meeting, and then you just go right there. You can select a time and just do it. Hopefully, it'll help your life, help your family in the future. Also, I think it's really awesome that Matt recognized that we were looking for a sponsor here on No Dumb Questions, and he jumped in to do that. I just want to say thanks. That's really cool of you. I'm grateful.
Yeah, I agree. And the service was really, really helpful. We've implemented a ton of stuff that came out of these 2 conversations in our household and in our plan. This is kind of a watershed moment for our family in terms of what our plan looks like. We've taken a lot of his advice. It's been very helpful.
That's awesome. A big thank you to Matthew Nordman and Scott Morrison for supporting the podcast. They went to our little thing, nodumbquestions.fm/sponsor. They put a bid on the sponsorship slot for the podcast to support the podcast. We're grateful. If you'd like to show them that you're grateful, please consider going to morrisonnordman.com and schedule your Getting to Know You call today. Last little thing I have to say here is securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Inc., Morrison Nordman Wealth Management, and Securities America are separate entities. Thank you very much for supporting the podcast.
Back to the biomass thing, and I suppose in keeping with what you're just saying, biomass, in a sense, is that local vision that the dude in Utah was telling you about. At the simplest, localist level, that is energy you are responsible for, energy that you manage and make decisions for. It's just incomplete energy. It only does so much. But the principle is there. I mean, from the dawn of time, humans have managed their own energy, usually heat energy, to meet needs, augment things about their natural environment to make things go. It's only really very recent that we are managing that at such a grand corporate scale with so many influences and so many hands in that. Honestly, it seems like it's going pretty well. One of the things I do not have big gripes with is the grid.
In America.
Yeah, fair. In the upper Midwest or Mountain West. I know there are other places where people might have complaints about how the grid works.
Yeah.
But we've got a company called Black Hills Energy that it has Black Hills in the name, but it's, Iowa and Wyoming and Colorado. And this is just this gigantic energy company that's out of Rapid City, South Dakota. I have no complaints. It seems to work. It doesn't seem to be politicized. It doesn't seem like there's a bunch of stupid debate and argument and bickering about it. Basically, people would like to have affordable energy in their homes. And for the most part, they get pretty affordable, very reliable energy in their homes. How would nuclear make that better, either locally or regionally, in your opinion?
Well, number one, it's cleaner. So no matter what you think about climate change, I mean, there are people that have very strong opinions about this. What I've decided to say about this is, hey, what if we do everything cleaner and all we have to show for it is this much greener, cleaner Earth? Man, that sucks. That's
right.
That's a crazy way of thinking. So
yeah,
I'm all about clean energy, no matter what you think. And I think we should be doing things cleaner. In France, for example, they're at 80% of their grid nuclear energy. Did you know that?
What's Germany at?
I don't know. It's getting less every day.
But right, they're reducing it, correct?
They're shutting down nuclear plants with that, which I think is...
Do you know why?
I think it's political. I don't know why.
What political party would want clean energy to go away? I just don't understand. I usually have a pretty good sense of the political matrix.
Yeah.
Like, if you have this theory,
yeah,
then right now it's fashionable to be against this and really for this in a way that everybody knows. That's how politics works.
Yeah.
This is one of the places where my political grid just breaks down. I don't understand who it would benefit to be against nuclear.
Right. Exactly. Especially when you're bringing in a big pipe from Russia and you're coupling yourself in a very, very real political way to an unstable dictator. He's not, I don't know if he say he's a dictator, but an unstable country that does drastic things in a short time frame. So
if you're the kind of president where there's a possible threat of imprisonment for playing a fake staged hockey game with him, and if you hit him or disrupt his goal scoring, your family could suffer consequences, I think you're a dictator.
It's pretty wild.
I think that's it. He skates pretty well. You got to give the guy credit. He moves. He's an old dude. He moves pretty well on skates anyway.
I mean, I think it makes sense to have more nuclear plants. I do. I think, and so I'm about to start making that push on Smarter Every Day. I'm going to start talking about that, but I'm going to try to do it in a really cool way. I got to go to the first ever nuclear plant, the first place in the world that produced light from nuclear energy.
Where's that?
It's in Idaho. It's there at Idaho National Labs. It's called EBR-1, Experimental Breeder Reactor 1.
How big is it?
It's not big at all. It's not big at all. It's like a grocery store. It's tiny, and there's just a tiny reactor, and they had a little old school steam turbine left over from World War II, and it just flicked on lights for the first day. And there's really cool. They have on the wall there, written in chalk, and said, this place was the first place in the world where nuclear energy created usable power for people. It said something like that. It happened on this date, and these people were present. And they wrote it all down, and then at the end, they said, a couple days later, they had the janitor come sign it too. And so the janitor came and signed as well.
Nice.
And then they immediately covered it in glass. They're like, this is a big deal. We're going to cover this in glass. And so it was declared a historical site.
Yeah.
It's no longer producing electrical power with nuclear energy, but it's all preserved. You can see the hand-drawn curves from the engineers that were running the different things. Like, for example, if you're to try to measure temperature of something, and you have a thermocouple. Do you know what a thermocouple is?
I don't.
Take two dissimilar metals and you create a junction. Just think of it as like soldering, kind of.
Okay.
Soldering a junction between those two dissimilar metals. You take that and you put it somewhere. The fact that there's a temperature difference at that location. I don't remember what the effect's called. It may be it's not the Peltier effect.
So you're taking two metals where you know the conductivity value
copper
of
and
each,
Inconel, or just some
and somehow comparing that.
Yeah,
is how you draw the conclusion.
Well,
about
no,
the
it'll
temperature?
produce a voltage. It'll produce a voltage.
Really?
And so, yeah, you take two dissimilar metals, and there's all types of standardized thermocouples, and you put them together, two wires, and you put them in a place where there's a change in temperature, and you will get a voltage out of that. In fact, you can create energy like this. I think it's called a pile. I don't remember. But anyway, so this is a thing you can do. But when you do this, you get a voltage out, and you have to equate that to a temperature. So the way you would do that is if you had a cup of ice water, like this cup of ice water I have right here.
Okay.
The water in that
Mm-hmm.
is what temperature?
Cold.
You know what temperature it is. What's the temperature of the water?
How would I know what the temperature is? I mean, it's just ice water. It's, I don't know, 34 degrees.
It's the freezing point. So
Well, why would that? It's got to be above freezing point, or that would all be frozen. I mean, you have ice water there, so it's got to be just a little bit above because your ice is gradually melting, right?
So I'm holding the cup, and so everything outside the water is above the freezing point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so heat's going into the water,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's slowly trying to heat the water up, but the ice is keeping it from doing that because the ice, it's a boundary condition. So you got a boundary condition outside the cup, you got a boundary condition at the ice.
But my assumption would be that heat working from the outside in is not evenly distributed through that water. I mean, you did shake it just a little bit.
Yeah, at the micro level, you're right. You got some convection going on, so you're right. But for the most part, it's right at freezing. Put a thermocouple in there, and you just have water. Put a thermocouple in there, so it'll be at whatever room temperature is, right? You drop ice in it, then the temperature of the water is going to go down until it gets to the freezing point, to the ice temperature, right? And then you've got this tug of war that's happening between the temperature of the water and the temperature of the ice, and they kind of neutralize right at the freezing point.
Okay.
And so the ice itself could be colder than the freezing point, right?
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. So the temperature is going to stay right there at that level until all the ice melts, and then the temperature will start to rise again. Likewise, when you boil water, same thing happens. It's 212 Fahrenheit, 100 degrees C.
Mm-hmm.
That cup of water right there is basically 0 degrees C, 32.17 Fahrenheit, whatever it is. And so what you can do is you can take this thermocouple that we were talking about, and you can make an ice water bath, and you can put the thermocouple in there, and you read the voltage, and it says 5 volts. So we know that on our little chart, 5 volts equals 32.17 degrees Fahrenheit.
No, I had no idea how that worked.
And then we go to boiling water, and we stick our thermocouple in the boiling water, and we say, okay, that's 7 volts. And so 7 volts is equal to, I'm making things up, 7 volts is equal to 212 Fahrenheit or 100 degrees C. And so we now have a scale between 0 degrees centigrade and 100 degrees centigrade from 5 to 7, right?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, so what temperature is 6 volts?
Well, I don't know, a little more.
Oh, come on, do the math. From 0 to 100, and
Okay.
it's 5 volts to 7 volts. So what is 6 volts?
50.
Yeah, you just did it. In this new nuclear power plant, the first place they ever created nuclear energy, there were charts all over the place. So you'd have a meter that would say current, and it would be an ammeter, so it'd be measuring amps. Right beside it, there'd be a little bitty frame and a piece of graph paper just sitting there, and it would have somebody's hand-drawn curve. And what they did is they said, okay, well, this thing right here is the level of water in that tank over there. And they have some kind of device in there that when the tank was empty, because somebody went and measured it with a tape measure, when the tank was empty, we're at 4 volts. When the tank is full, we're at 12 volts. Or 12 amps, or whatever the device, however the device was measuring it.
Sure.
And so they just literally drew the graph, and they drew it on the page there. That's how you measured it. And so you read your meter, and you're like, oh, we're at 12 amps. And then you go over to the graph, and you go, the left and right. Okay, we're at 36 inches of water in our tank. It's cool. It's cool to see that how these people were trying to figure out how to measure all the things, and they didn't have the instrumentation, so they just made it.
And I'm particularly fascinated by the implications for all of this in terms of scale. I mean, that gets us pretty close to why I brought this whole thing up. The relationship between energy and power, not energy power, but power, to expand the influence of the individual, or to expand the influence of a noble state, or to expand the influence of an ignoble state. It seems like power is very attached to energy. Every single stupid action, sci-fi, comic book movie seems to understand this relationship. There's a blue light laser going into the sky. That's a bad guy trying to harness energy so that they can rule the world. And it seems to me that a great way to democratize power, not just through the force of the law and saying we're going to have democracy and saying we're going to respect the nobility of the individual. It seems like a great way to do it is to come up with more ways that take energy, make it safe, make it clean, but put you in charge of it.
Yeah, everybody gets their own little fusion reactor.
Because power is power.
Which is incredibly hard
I feel
to
a little bit of pause over the fusion reactor side of things. But solar and little local wind generators, they don't get this done. It doesn't accomplish this vision that I'm talking about here.
And the reason is because it's cyclical. Like the sun's only out at certain times of day. If you're in Finland, you get several months where you just don't get sun.
They should vote to change that.
The wind, you don't get to decide when the wind kicks on. And so
you do in Wyoming.
Do you?
Always.
Really?
Yeah, it's always on.
Do you guys have a lot of condor Cuisinarts out there?
It's the...
have you ever heard that term?
No.
These windmills were like going to save the world, right? And then they noticed, I don't remember where it was. Maybe it was California, where they were starting to, the birds couldn't see
It's
them.
just a bird blender?
It's a bird blender.
Reference?
So
okay.
the condor Cuisinarts. But the windmills, or wind turbines, I always try to say turbines, not windmills. So a mill is a thing that grinds up the grain.
Mm-hmm.
A turbine is a thing that, it's like a gear train. You can create power with it. So I always try to say wind turbine. So I think the wind turbine is the promise of a beautiful future that Al Gore gave us all. But then I don't think it's actually what it all cracked up to be, because there's many issues with wind turbines. Like at the end of the life cycle, how do you dispose of that thing?
It's proven to be brutally difficult. I mean, we're making giant landfill graveyards with parts of these non-recyclable wind turbines. And I mean, it was fun to imagine that would be clean, but there's a huge economic, energy, and environmental cost to getting rid of the thing. And my impression is that the equation is upside down. The negatives in those three categories are outweighing the positives. I could be wrong. I'm not against wind power. I'm against power that doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And if wind power is what I'm starting to get the impression it is, then I'm against it, because it would mean the only reason we're really doing it is performative.
It makes people feel good. It makes people, if it looks neat to have a big thing. I saw
Well, that's going to pivot then, because things that make people feel good but aren't what they thought it was, as soon as it quits making people feel good, people turn on those things aggressively.
I think the important thing is you have to be intellectually honest. We talked about ADA before, efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
In order to be intellectually honest about nuclear power, we have to take into account the diesel fuel that was in the dump truck or the big loader that helped get that uranium out of the ground.
Yes, you do.
And we have to take into account the energy in the welder, the power being used in the welder that helped make that reactor.
Yeah, and if you really want to get it, how about the $3.50 gasoline for the person running the welder to get to work that day?
Yeah.
How many people had to show up? What did it take to put food in their bellies? I mean, all of those things are part of the equation.
They go into the equation. And
Mm-hmm.
so the interesting thing is a lot of people don't like nuclear because it feels bad in their minds. I feel the exact opposite. But if you look at the amount of people that have been killed by nuclear power versus the amount of people that have been killed by, for example, what was it, Kentucky or Tennessee, where they had this big ash flood. We talked, when we were talking about our floods episode, all these people that died as a result of this storage facility of all this coal fly ash or whatever it was called.
How many people have been killed as a result of nuclear power, not including nuclear attack?
Oh, it's very, very small.
Who knows is the internet.
In Fukushima, I think the answer was 0, wasn't it?
Was it one?
Was it one guy?
No, the guy who went in, who was late in life, the one engineer who was like, somebody needs to go in there. I'll do it, like Spock in Star Trek 2 or whatever it was. Where he went and,
God,
you remember that scene?
You will just spoil a movie for me in a heartbeat, and just like
Star Trek 2 from 1982.
with zero
from 1982.
inhibitions. You're like, you know what,
Dude, you have had 4+ decades to go and watch that film.
There's a
It has
movie-
literally existed for your entire life.
dude.
Leonard Nimoy has been dead for the better part of a decade.
I'm just saying. It's a thing. It's a blind spot.
Okay,
We all
that's
have
fair.
them.
Hey, look, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but
Yeah.
I actually am. Esther gets the king to execute Haman at the end of the book.
Why would you tell me
Well,
that?
you should have read it. You had a chance to read it. It's been out since 450 BC. If you didn't get around to it, that's your own problem.
We're stupid.
Why would you tell me? How could you? No, I want to know how many total deaths from nuclear.
I've got a book in here that tells me that.
Okay. All right, here we go. PalEngineering.com, February 2021. Have we had any nuclear meltdowns that have killed people since 2021?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either. So let's assume these numbers are somewhat reliable. There have been 3 major accidents at nuclear power plants since their inception in 1951.
Chernobyl,
You know
3 Mile Island, and Fukushima.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. You know where 3 Mile Island is?
New York.
That's what I thought too. This says Middleton, Pennsylvania.
Really?
I thought it was New York.
I did too. I was wrong about that then.
I mean, I would have said that with absolute confidence, kind of like you did.
Hmm.
You know where Chernobyl is?
That's that's like West Texas, right?
According to this, Haiti.
Really?
Who would have thought? Fukushima?
Fukushima, that's in Mexico, right?
No, it's Japan.
Dadgummit,
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
I thought I knew this stuff.
Well, there was a pattern and you failed to pick up on it. All right. Capacity factor by energy source. Okay, there's ratio, energy. Looks like nuclear looks really, really good there. All right. Loss of life in nuclear accidents. Here we go. With the caveat that no loss of human life should be considered acceptable. Hey, good writing.
Yeah, that's good.
Way to not crassify it. Why didn't I think of that? I agree with that caveat. I affirm it. The International Atomic Energy Agency. Okay, so they're going to be a little bit biased in favor of atomic energy, I think.
I don't know that they are.
The International Atomic Energy Agency?
They're pretty good.
All right.
I mean, the nuclear regulatory agencies are incredibly, depending on who you talk to. Like, if you work at a nuclear plant, you would almost view them as oppressive.
Okay, I can see. Okay, I can picture that.
Yeah, because, I mean, people are scared of nuclear, so they go over the top to make sure it's safe. The IAEA is, it kind of serves double duty because they want to make sure nobody's refining stuff more than they should.
Okay. How many people do you think they say died at Chernobyl?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't watched the HBO series. I don't know.
They say 31.
Wow.
Yeah, 2 of those deaths were due to the explosion.
Okay.
29 were first responders.
Okay.
But isn't there like life shortened by cancer and
There's
stuff
gotta
like
be.
that from Chernobyl?
There's got to be.
I mean, I guess that's a comorbidity at that point, whereas the first responders and obviously,
Yep.
regrettably getting exploded,
Yeah.
that's not a comorbidity. Like if you had COVID when Chernobyl exploded and you were in Chernobyl, I think that's just a Chernobyl death. I think we should count it that way. Okay. Fukushima, 20,000 died in the earthquake. Wow.
In the earthquake itself.
20,000 in the flood and the earthquake, dude.
That's a lot of people. Golly, that's a lot of people.
3 Lander Wyomings.
Wow. That's amazing.
Total number killed as from the radiation exposure, it was 1.
It was one guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
That said, an additional 573 indirect deaths are attributed to the disaster, mostly due to evacuation stress.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. Oh, and here's the one that I always heard about when I was a kid. Total deaths at 3 Mile Island?
I don't know.
0.
Yeah.
Since 1951, 667 nuclear power plants have been built across the world. Today, 440 are operating across 32 countries and account for more than 10% of total electricity produced. To put these numbers into perspective, in 70 years and with a total of 667 nuclear power plants that have ever operated, only 3 major accidents have taken place, and the combined death total is 32. This sentence is amazing. In fact, estimates on the number of deaths caused by the nuclear energy sector overall is 90 per I don't know what these numbers and letters mean. I'm going to show you. 1,000 capital
terawatt hours.
Huh. That seems pretty good. They estimate that coal, if nuclear is 9 per, what did I just say, 1,000 terawatt hours?
Yeah.
Coal, they say, is 100,000.
Whoa. Those are very different numbers.
Those are very different numbers. If that is to be trusted, those are very compelling numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
Interesting. So my initial thought was, I like nuclear power, and I am balky about the idea of any kind of democratization of that, any local expression of that. But if you could take those safety standards and have them applied at more local levels, and we could get those numbers, that amount of energy with that amount of safety, or even close to that amount of safety, I don't get why we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, but you're thinking about traditional reactors too. Like some of the newer reactor technologies are incredibly safe. Some of the newer reactors they're working on, they can't melt down because they're already molten.
So meltdown, though, that's not just an expression for like break. Meltdown is a specific heat reaction. It's a specific process that occurs.
I'm not prepared to talk about this, and this is why, because I am on the beginning of my journey to learn a lot about nuclear power. And for example, one of the videos I recorded, and it's amazing, is how to measure the temperature of a nuclear reactor core.
Anal thermometer?
Close, except for the anal part. It's not.
Okay, so you don't.
Nothing.
Okay.
There's no.
Because I think there's a special tip on those.
Nope.
I didn't know if it
none
would
of
help.
that.
Okay.
None of that. Yeah.
So just a regular one.
I don't know. I don't want to talk about it yet because it's so cool, and I went so deep down the rabbit hole, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Like the fact that you can monitor inside of a nuclear reactor is incredible, because the fact that the reactor is running means you are irradiating the device that you are using to record the temperature. And so the ability of that device to measure temperature changes. And so you remember the curve we drew earlier between ice and boiling water? So what that means is your thermometer, the curve that it responds to different temperatures, is changing as you're measuring. So it's kind of a weird differential equation. And so it gets more complicated than just sticking a thermocouple down there. You have to do really neat things, including I got to meet a scientific glass blower, and he showed me how to make a thing that could tell you some temperature.
That's as opposed to like an artisanal medieval Renaissance fair glass blower?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So instead of using soda lime glass, they're using quartz. They're using borosilicate, and they're using, which is Pyrex. They're using really interesting things, which means the working time they have on these materials is lower because they don't have this plateau of workability in the temperature curve. I don't know.
Okay, well, we're not done with that conversation.
A deep rabbit hole.
And I understand that. The biggest thing that I wanted to pick your brain about, and you were the right person. I mean, dude, the fact that you could just engage in an hour of that with no warning, no notice, no heads up, and take me down that rabbit hole is great. But if you recall, all the way back at the conversation, we're talking about the monocled steampunk supervillain who controls all the energy and has a dirigible with auto guns on it.
For some reason, he looks like Wario in my head.
He does.
Yeah.
And the curly mustache holds up the monocle.
Maybe not the hat, but
he's a little overweight, but he has suspenders, so it's working. And the suspenders are metal. Okay, we're picturing the same guy then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we can agree on that. Perfect. It's a laughable caricature, obviously, but also there's a reason that motif keeps coming up in storytelling. It's because it's a believable motif. Power is power. If you distribute actual power, not imagined power, like we will not comply, we're going to resist. Okay, cool. But actual practical usable energy, if you distribute the control over that, I think human rights abuses are harder to have happen. I think justice is more likely to happen. With power comes resources. It comes with the ability for people from any background who speak any language, coming from any story, just history aside, here's access to energy and power that you can just do things with build things with, be creative. And I think the result could be, I think there could be answers to some of the questions we have societally about justice, about how we move forward, about community and unity and being one people in the democratization of energy. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about what that could even look like, and this was really helpful.
Thank you very much for asking these questions. I've got so much stuff in my head right now, and I'm scared to say any of it because it's not fully formed. And I want to revisit this in the future because I've got some ideas that I want to run past you, including the geopolitical ramifications of certain countries using certain types of reactors.
Yes, I'm down for further conversation. And also, I have another whole thread of questions about this that I want to pick your brain about. And we'll do that in a future episode as well.